Let's unbox the Hot Wheels Starships Select First Order TIE Fighter. Varykino. If it's Star Wars, we collect it. Hello there, thanks for visiting Varykino. I really like the Hot Wheels Starship Select line of Star Wars vehicles, and I'm really excited for the new wave. Sadly, it's not available here in New Zealand yet, so while I eagerly wait that one to show up at Stockers here, I thought I would quickly go through and finally unbox the last three that I have in my collection that are still in their boxes. I love this line. I've collected as many of them as I can find here in New Zealand, but as you can see, my first order TIE Fighter is still in its box. So it's definitely time to get this one out so I can add it alongside my other Starship Select vehicles, and I really want to see this one alongside my other TIE Fighters from this range. I have the standard original trilogy TIE Fighter, the battle damaged one. I really want to see this one alongside it. So thank you so much for hanging out with me today. Coming up really soon, I'll get the first order TIE Fighter out of the packaging so we can take a closer look. But first, let's take one last look at the box. I really like the way that the Hot Wheels Starship Select line has kept their packaging the very same since the very first release, which is fantastic if you like to keep yours boxed. They line up really nice. The packaging's always the same. We've got the Star Wars logo here, black and white at the top. Lovely big window that wraps around on both sides, which for the TIE Fighter I think is especially important. Really shows off that really cool wing detail. TIE Fighters always look cool from the front. You see the cockpit, but something about that iconic wing detail there, you really want to be able to see that if you're keeping yours in your packaging there. We've got the Hot Wheels Starship Select logo down here underneath the window here at the front, and of course the name for this one is First Order TIE Fighter. We have the Mattel logo here, and we can see this is intended for ages 4 and up. Though it is a fairly heavy metal die-cast vehicle, I don't really think I would be giving this to children. I probably give them plastic toys. On the top, rather than having a window to let in light, we just have these printed images here. We have a black and white blueprint style image of the TIE Fighter seen from the front, and we have the faction symbol, which for this one is the First Order logo. On the top of the hanger, we can see the number in the line. This is number 14, and again the name for the vehicle, First Order TIE Fighter. The underside is just barcode and all of that sort of copyright stuff. Moving on to the back, you can see we have our local retailer sticker here with the price tag of $29.99. That is New Zealand dollars. That's approximately 18 US dollars if you're curious. That is what they retail for. But here in New Zealand, it's fairly easy to find Hot Wheels products at about 20% off, so we generally pay about 24 or 25 for our Hot Wheels Starship Select vehicles. I do apologize, the price sticker is covering the little image here, but this particular retailer has stickers that are very hard to remove, but it was on sale, so that's why I picked it up from this particular retailer. We can see, because it's not really visible here in the front, that this does include a flight stand, which lets us display the vehicle in sort of a flight mode raised up there, where we can rotate it 360 degrees. I love the stands in this range. We've got a nice clear image here of the First Order TIE Fighter displayed on the stand, and below it we can see some of the other vehicles from this particular wave assortment: the Millennium Falcon, an AT-AT, and the Resistance X-Wing fighter. I have this one still boxed, so I will be unboxing this one very soon as well. The rest of it's just the sort of standard copyright text containing one vehicle, one accessory, the Mattel logos, and we can see this is not intended for young children 3 and under. So overall, nice packaging. I do think because this one is so dark, we've got a lot of black on the TIE Fighter itself, it possibly could have benefited from having a window in the top, but personally for me, I like to open mine up, so I'm not too worried about how dark it is, especially since the backdrop is also black inside these boxes. So I'm definitely keen to finally get mine out of the packaging so I can finally see it all really well and clear. Now I have the First Order TIE Fighter out of the packaging, and I also have the small box containing the parts to assemble the flight stand over here. That was tucked in on the underside of the box, so it is included even though you can't see it through the window. And I just wanted to quickly show the insert behind the vehicle. It is kind of dark when it's all boxed up, but we can see this really nice black and white blueprint style artwork of the ships available in this specific wave assortment. We have the AT-AT, Millennium Falcon, First Order TIE Fighter, and Resistance X-Wing. This is always a really fun little graphic to cut out and keep if you're getting rid of the rest of your packaging. But of course, let's get stuck into checking out all of the details of this First Order TIE fighter. And I'm always kind of surprised, I know I say this often, about just how heavy they are. I know when you're holding the box, most of it is the weight of the metal vehicle inside, but when you strip away the cardboard and everything, you get a real true sense of just how heavy they are. And they just feel really fun to hold when you finally get them out of the packaging. It's one of the reasons why I like to get mine out. They just feel nice, and you can see I'm seeing a lot more details because of course we've got a lot of dark coloring here that was really hidden when it was inside the box, and it just looks fantastic. So let's go over all of the details. I'm going to start off with the iconic TIE Fighter wings. I love the wings. Of course, very similar to the original trilogy TIE Fighter, but we've got different colorings here, and I'm always impressed with just the sheer amount of fine detail they get on this. You can really see all of that texture there on the TIE Fighter panel wings, each matching sort of the orientation here of each section there. And we've got some fantastic sculpted detail here. It's a little bit dark. Of course, that matches with the First Order sort of black and white coloring scheme here. But oh my gosh, just absolutely fantastic. Such a fine level of detail. The First Order is very clean, so I wasn't expecting to see any weathering on this vehicle. And you can see that we don't have anything sort of as a wash or accenting, especially on the dark sections. Everything looks clean. Not exactly a gloss black. It is a very dark gray, but it does have a nice sort of clean finish to it. Some of the other ships in the line have a little bit of a weathering to sort of highlight some of the metal sculpted detail there. Absolutely fantastic. Really nice, tidy, clean paint lines here because of course, because we've got such a stark contrast between the dark gray and the sort of very pale gray, not quite white, any sort of paint flaws would really show up. I think we've got a tiny little flick there that's just showing up, but again, tiny. I love the detail, the texture. You can feel it when you run your fingers over it. Just great. It really does withstand being looked at very, very close up. And of course, that texture and detail is on the inside there as well. Just really fantastic. I can just notice there is a tiny flaw here where it's kind of a little bit bubbled, and I'm not sure if that is the metal underneath in the casting or the paint. It's a little bit hard to show. It's on the inside panel. It'd be a little bit more bothersome if it was on the outside. And I have to say that's kind of rare for a Hot Wheels product. I generally find it's kind of uncommon to find flaws with this range. I really, really like just how quality they are for a relatively affordable price point. In New Zealand, as I mentioned before, the retail cost of these ships is about the same price as a Funko Pop vinyl. So, you know, you can generally afford to grab a few of these to put on your display shelf. Even if you just have one favorite ship or you like to collect the whole range, they are certainly affordable, you know, around the same price point as say a TVC Vintage Collection 3.75 inch figure here as well. We've got a lot of Star Wars collectibles around that $30 price point here in New Zealand. I absolutely love the cockpit here. Of course, it's not plastic. It doesn't see through. There is no internal cockpit. If I turn it around to the back, we can see that we have the metal rivet sort of attaching the metal components together. And on the underside, we can see the plastic attachment point. On the most part, Hot Wheels Starship Selects are about as metal as they can be. But any small items that sort of protrude are generally made out of plastic for safety concerns because this is marketed to children. So I am expecting, yes, this little antenna section here, this is plastic. I can sort of just gently wobble it. It's not really rubbery. It's taking a little bit of force to bend that. It's got a very rounded tip there, but of course it's not going to snap off. It's not metal, and you're not going to sort of damage anything with that because it is plastic. And the attachment point is generally plastic because it's fitting onto a plastic stand as well. Just less sort of tension there by trying to sort of fit plastic and metal together on the stand. So of course we don't have a plastic cockpit window there. It is opaque. It is painted in a gloss black, but considering how dark TIE Fighter cockpits are in particular, they're black on the inside with generally pilots wearing full black flight suits and helmets. I doubt we'd see much. And of course, the Hot Wheels Starship Select line don't include little figures. I know in the vintage era, some of the die-cast vehicles had tiny little plastic pilots and figures sort of sculpted into cockpits. These ones don't, and I don't really miss them in this line. I know that one of the sort of competing lines, the Micro Galaxy Squadron line by Jazzwares, includes little plastic figures that you can fit in, but the scale of these ones is a little bit smaller generally. The Micro Galaxy Squadron line is all in scale to themselves. The Hot Wheels Starship Select line is all about the same size to keep that price point the same for each vehicle. So of course we're not really going to be able to fit a tiny little figure in here. It doesn't bother me. I think it looks cool just like this. And somehow for Star Wars, especially in the original trilogy, TIE fighters felt sort of very personless. They always felt more like sort of drones chasing you down. I know that every time Han Solo and Luke Skywalker celebrated destroying a TIE fighter, they had killed somebody, but it somehow never felt like that. It always sort of felt like a faceless sort of drone of the Empire chasing them down, and you sort of celebrated when they shot them down at the same time. So yes, it doesn't bother me that there's no figures inside, and I just love that gloss black there on the cockpit. We've got an accent paint job there of silver, which really does look really nice and tidy there. Really helps define all of those little windows there. And of course, we've got a few other little accent points of paint. We've got the two little red points down the front here for the laser cannons. Nothing much else. It's pretty just that sort of dark gray. It's got a little bit of a satin finish to it. It's not a gloss, though we do have some gloss black for the top. Again, this doesn't open, that canopy doesn't pop open, so it's just a gloss black paint rather than a plastic or anything where we could see into it. And you can see the seam line. Of course, we have to have some seam lines for joining together all of the metal components. I like how it's hidden on the top. I generally don't see a lot of the seam lines. We can see there from the front. It really does look like a pretty well scaled and detailed TIE fighter from the First Order. Just looks fantastic. We can see that inside detail there for the wing connections. Just really nice. I just love this line. Just, it feels fun to hold. They're great for bookshelves and things like that, and they look really, really cool all together. Overall, we've just got that one tiny floor. Oh, and I do have to note that the wings on these ones don't come off. They are permanently attached, so don't try and pull them off. They're intended to be sort of all permanently attached because this is metal on metal. I trust Mattel to assemble this better than I ever would. This isn't the sort of plastic Hasbro ones where the wings sort of pop off in a play feature. I know technically they are targeted to kids, you know, they're in the kids section, it's Hot Wheels and Mattel, but they really do excel as a collectible for display. Just the level of detail, they just look fantastic. And there's something about the really stark contrast of the dark gray and white or very pale gray that just looks really great. I know it's a bit different to the original coloring, the original trilogy ones that were sort of gray and black or that kind of blue gray, depending on where you go, or some of the ones towards the sort of vintage action figure lines that were sort of a paler gray. I just, something about this one is just so iconic, even though it's from the Sequel Trilogy, it's newer, it just feels like something I've seen for many, many years. So I love this. Let's get it on its display stand. So tucked away in the underside of the packaging, we have this extra little cardboard box, which we can see includes two components that are going to form our display stand. So let's get them out. We've got the base wrapped up in tissue paper, and we also have the sort of the flight stand component there. We can see the ball-shaped attachment point that is going to be mounting on to the TIE fighter. So let's get the base plate wrapped. There we go. It's wrapped up in tissue paper because we have some metallic silver printing here, which is on all of the bases. We can see the faction symbol here, which is of course the First Order logo, and the name for this one that says First Order TIE. Interesting that the text on this doesn't actually fully match what was on the box, First Order TIE Fighter. Usually it matches very closely to what is on the box, but this one does not have the word fighter on it. That's kind of interesting. Perhaps they thought it was just going to be too small of a font to fit the word fighter in there, so they've just cut that off. Kind of interesting. Across the front we have two sort of recessed logos here. We have the Star Wars logo recessed here on the left, and on the right we have the very small Hot Wheels flame logo there as well. So let's snap the two pieces together. There's always a nice sturdy click, and once they come together, you can take them apart, but they're really sturdy. Once they're together, they're nice and secure, because of course they do have to hold up a metal vehicle. So I'm just going to quickly push the attachment point into the little insertion point on the TIE Fighter. I get this here, nice, and it just kind of, I just find just a little bit of a wiggly pressure down. That one's kind of a little bit tight, but I do find them to be fantastically secure. And I'll just quickly demonstrate. I can tip it upside down and this doesn't come off. You can, of course, pull it off, but I like how sturdy it is because, of course, these are metal. And even though that flight stand has a curve to it, they are so well balanced. Now, because it's on that ball attachment point, we can do a lot of posability, though of course the wings on the TIE Fighter are going to hit at this point when I'm sort of rotating it around to the back. So it's not going to spin at 360 like the box sort of says, because of course a lot of the flatter ships, you can rotate them 360, and for some weird reason they just kind of keep that graphic on the back of the box. So theoretically I could spin it, but the wings do get in the way, but we've got a lot of sort of maneuverability. So if you want to sort of pose yours in a little bit of a dogfight with a neighboring Resistance X-Wing, or you want yours just nice and straightforward, you've got the ability to pose it how you like. And I really like that. And I like how sturdy it is. I like the sort of forward momentum here. Even though it's obviously a static display, it just gives a bit of movement, the sense of movement, like it's flying forward. I really like that. And of course the glossy black stand works so well for the First Order. It is the same stand used across the line. Every vehicle in the Hot Wheels Starship Select line comes with a black base, with the exception of the new prototype vehicles. They have a white base to distinguish them from the standard line. The prototype ones are obviously in that sort of bright color, prototype style. They are kind of almost a sub-line, a little bit different. You don't need to display them beside these ones because they are not in world. They're sort of a toy prototype, but just fantastic. I love the silver here, just kind of mimicking the silver here of the cockpit. It just looks great. Oh, fantastic. Okay, so now that I have this one on its stand, I really want to see it beside some of my original trilogy TIE Fighters. So I'm just going to grab a couple that I have on hand because there is a little bit of just an interesting story. So this one here is the battle damaged TIE Fighter. You can see we've got those extra sort of printed graphics there on the side indicating some battle damage. Because if I grab another one, this is the standard original trilogy TIE Fighter that came out in the very first wave. When I put these two together, you might be able to see that this one is on a taller stand, especially if I move it to the front. So sometime between the first wave and when they did a battle damaged version, they heightened the stand, and I thought that was kind of curious. And personally, I love the higher stand. And because the stands are tucked away in the underside of the box, I didn't know what style of stand this First Order TIE Fighter would have. And I'm really happy to see that it does indeed look like the taller one. It's a very small difference. You can see there's not a huge difference in the height of the wings, but there is just something about it that just sort of makes it just a little bit more lifted, gives the wings a little bit more space, particularly when you look at it from the side. It's very close to the display stand here. I just like having a little bit more breathing room. It does make them some of the taller vehicles in the line because of course TIE Fighters have these tall wings, very different to say the Mandalorian Gauntlet Fighter, which is very flat. So I just think that looks so cool on the taller stand. I'm really happy that it is the taller version of the TIE Fighter stand. I'm almost tempted to try and track down another one of this one, so that I can add the taller stand to this one, because even though this is a variant, it has the exact same text there on the base. It says TIE Fighter with the Imperial cog symbol. It's the same logo and the same base as this one, except for that different flight stand. So I'm kind of tempted to see if I can track down one of these and put the stand on this one. So I've got them all at the same height. But of course, this one was the very first wave. I guess they decided that they wanted them to be a little bit taller to better match the rest of the ships in the line. And that just looks really, really cool, getting them all lined up. And you can see on the original trilogy ones, that weathering, the sort of the wash to accent the detail there, especially in the sort of central detail. It's a little bit of a subtle black wash to accent it, and that is again the same on this one. And then of course, because it's so dark, accenting I don't think would really show up, and just the First Order is very glossy. I know on the whole the Empire is very glossy when we think about sort of Death Star hallways and things like that, but not quite as glossy as the First Order. I don't know why it just sort of comes across that way. So I don't mind that this doesn't have any weathering, especially when I line it up to this. I just don't think the dark color needs it, but we can see the wings there. So I think it's interesting that this one is sculpted differently. Of course, we've got the sort of the different cockpits. They haven't just repainted the same sculpt. There is a lot of difference between the two TIE fighters. Of course, there are many years between the two trilogies. I'm just curious to see if the wings are the same. It's a little hard to tell because of course we've got a lot of different painting details. These might be the same wings. We've still got the same patterns, and I think the details, no, the sculpting in the center is different. There's a lot of similarities, certainly the scale, but the very central details are different. That's nice. I like that it is different. I can start to see, once my eyes adjust to the different colors, I can see the differences in the sculpting. So that's nice. I know that some toy lines do tend to use the same sculpts, even though technically there's some differences. In particular, I recently unboxed the original trilogy A-Wing from the Micro Galaxy Squadron line, and it has exactly the same sculpting as the Resistance A-Wing, which obviously came out many years later in terms of the timeline, and the Hera's one from Rebels, which is set before the original trilogy. So all three of those A-Wings should be different sculptings, but the company Jazzwares just used the same mold for all three because of course it's minor differences and it's just easier for them to repaint them rather than resculpt them. But I do like to see that the differences here, this is a completely new sculpt. I was fairly certain because of the differences, especially on the inner attachment points, much more chunkier and different. If I can sort of hold up these ones, you can see the very different attachment points on the inside of the wing. So I was fairly certain, but of course the outside of the wings do look very similar. It just took me a moment to make sure that they were actually different. So that's really fun to see in person. The Hot Wheels line's just fantastic. Every time I open up one of these ones, I'm just absolutely loving it. So there you go. You can see 3 of the TIE fighters all lined up. There are a couple of others, including the TIE Interceptor and Darth Vader's TIE Fighter. I've still got to open Darth Vader's TIE Fighter, saving one of my favorites till last while I wait for that fantastic new wave to arrive here in New Zealand. So this was a really good way to kind of pass the time while I wait for that wave to arrive here. I'm really excited about some of the vehicles in that assortment, but what a way to spend an afternoon unboxing a fantastic First Order TIE Fighter from one of my favorite toy lines, the Hot Wheels Starship Select. It looks great, and I like having another TIE Fighter variant for my collection. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today as I opened up another Star Wars collectible and had a lot of fun. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening wherever you are in the galaxy, and let's hang out again very soon for more Star Wars fun. May the Force be with you. If you're a Hot Wheels Starship Select fan, I recently unboxed the TIE Interceptor vehicle. That video is linked here in case you haven't already seen it, as well as a whole Hot Wheels Starship Select unboxing playlist. This is the way.